The music swelled, a cheerful, mindless tune that clashed violently with the searing, white-hot agony in my gut. I looked down, my mind refusing to process the image. My sister's hand, the one I'd held since we were toddlers, was clenched around the ornate handle of a fruit knife. The blade was buried to the hilt in my abdomen, the silk of my dress already darkening with a horrifying rapid bloom of crimson. Alara's eyes were wide, but not with shock. With triumph. A twisted, venomous victory etched onto her beautiful features. "He should have been mine," she hissed, her voice a guttural thing I barely recognized. "You stole my life. I hate you." The world tilted. The laughter and chatter of the birthday banquet guests faded into a distant, muffled roar. I crumpled to the polished floor, the cold marble a stark contrast to the feverish pain spreading through me. My last sight was her face, a grotesque mask of jealousy, and then Ronan's, his familiar features contorted in panic as he sprinted toward me through the crowd. Darkness. Then light. I gasped, my hand flying to my stomach. No wound. No blood. No pain. I was sitting at my vanity, staring into the mirror at my 20-year-old self. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "Lyra, are you awake? Cale and Ronan will be here any minute." My mother's voice, bright and unconcerned, floated up the stairs. A cold dread, colder than the marble floor I'd just died on, washed over me. I pinched the soft skin of my forearm hard. The sharp, real pain confirmed it. This wasn't a dream. The grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime, marking the hour of my 20th birthday. The day everything had been set to change. The day of the proposals. I descended the stairs on trembling legs. Downstairs, the scene was a perfect, painful recreation of my memory. My father and grandfather were sipping tea, their conversation a low murmur. And there, perched on the edge of the sofa like a queen awaiting her court, was Alara. She was already impeccably dressed and made up, a vision of calculated perfection. When her eyes met mine, a knowing, smug glint flashed within them. "She'd come back to Lyra," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The big day. We're choosing our future husbands. I already know exactly who I want." My blood ran cold. That tone, that look, it was the same one she'd worn just before she stabbed me. The doorbell rang, a cheerful chime that felt like a death knell. My mother led the two young men into the living room. On the left was Cale. He stood tall and straight in his crisp military uniform, his features clear and honest, his gaze calm and steady. On the right was Ronan, impeccably tailored in a designer suit, a luxury watch glinting on his wrist, a confident, almost bored smile playing on his lips. Grandfather beamed. "These are the granddaughters I'm always boasting about. Lyra and Alara. Years ago I made a promise to an old friend. Today we make good on it." In my first life, Grandfather had produced 2 slips of paper. But this time Alara didn't wait. She surged forward, cutting him off. "Grandfather," she declared, her voice ringing with certainty. "I want to marry Ronan." She strode directly to him, looping her arm through his with practiced ease. "It's love at first sight. I will only marry you." Everyone was stunned into silence. Ronan looked slightly uncomfortable but offered a polite, bemused smile. Grandfather, flustered, turned to me. "Lyra, then you will?" "I'd be happy to," I said, cutting him off before he could finish. I didn't look at Ronan. I didn't look at my sister's triumphant face. I walked directly toward Cale. He stood his ground, his clear, calm eyes watching my approach. He didn't smile, but he gave me a small, crisp nod of acknowledgement. A flicker of surprise, then resentment, passed over Alara's face before it settled back into smug satisfaction. She leaned close to me as we passed, her whisper a venomous promise. "This time I get the rich, powerful one. You can spend your life miserable with that broke, icy soldier." I met her gaze, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I wish you happiness." Cale gave me a formal, perfect military salute. "Miss Lyra," he said, his voice low and sincere. "I will do everything in my power to make you happy." His gaze was so earnest it sent a tremor through my heart. This was not the rigid, dull man Alara had described in her bitter rants. This was a man of substance. After the engagement was formalized, the families began planning the weddings. Ilara immediately launched into a campaign of flaunting the obscenely lavish betrothal gifts the Ronan family sent. Jewels, designer clothes, a sports car. She preened and paraded, constantly seeking me out to show off her latest acquisition. "Aren't you jealous, Lyra?" she finally asked one day, unable to bear my silence. I looked out the window at the sunlight. "Everyone has a different definition of happiness." She scoffed. "You'll understand just how important money is when you're stuck in some tiny old apartment, doing laundry and cooking all day." I simply smiled and said nothing. While she was busy with fittings for a gown that cost more than a car, I began quietly researching Cale's family, the Valors. They weren't wealthy, but they were known for their integrity and strong values. My mother told me Cale had already achieved the rank of captain at a young age. "His future is promising," she'd said, a hint of apology in her voice, as if promising wasn't as good as having. My father added that Cale's father had died young, and he'd been raised solely by his mother. It said Mrs. Valor is a woman of great principle, highly respected in their community. It was a far cry from Ilara's descriptions of a backward, poor military family. I chose a wedding dress of simple, elegant satin, adorned only with delicate floral embroidery. It was beautiful in its understatement. On the morning of the wedding, as my mother adjusted my veil, she tucked a fresh lily into my hair. "Cale asked what flower you liked. He had this flown in from Kunming this morning." The delicate fragrance was refreshing, a token of thoughtfulness that meant more to me than any jewel. When the church doors opened and I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I saw Cale standing tall at the altar. His dress uniform was sharply pressed, his shoulders straight. When he turned and saw me, his eyes lit up with an awe that made my breath catch. It wasn't a look of appraisal, it was one of genuine wonder. "You look beautiful today," he whispered, his voice trembling with a depth of emotion that felt far more real than any polished compliment. The ceremony was simple and solemn. He slipped a graceful platinum ring onto my finger. Inside, I could feel the delicate engraving of our initials. As we exchanged rings, I felt the rough layer of calluses on his palm, marks left by years of training, of holding a rifle, of hard work. "A life of action, not privilege. I will protect you with my life," he vowed, his thumb softly brushing the back of my hand. And in that moment, for the first time since I'd awoken in the past, I felt a flicker of something other than dread or purpose. I felt a sliver of hope. The commotion broke out just as we were pronounced husband and wife. The church doors swung open with a bang, and there stood Ilara, resplendent in her extravagant bejeweled gown, a human diamond. Behind her, visible through the doors, was a procession of 10 identical black Mercedes sedans. "Sorry I'm late, sister dear," she trilled, her voice sickeningly sweet. The Ronans sent 10 cars for the bridal escort, but the traffic was just terrible. She deliberately waved her wrist, flashing a heavy jade bracelet. "An heirloom from my mother-in-law. She insisted I wear it today." A wave of gasps and murmured admiration rippled through the crowd. I saw Cale's mother, a dignified woman with sharp eyes, frown slightly. But Cale only looked at me, his calm smile never wavering, as if this entire garish spectacle was happening on another planet entirely. At the banquet, Ilara and Ronan paraded from table to table, flaunting her 3-carat diamond ring. Cale and I sat quietly at the main table. He patiently peeled shrimp for me, dipping each one in vinegar before placing it on my plate. "You don't have to do that," I said, feeling a flush of embarrassment. "I'm used to taking care of my men in the army," he said with a soft smile. "And now you're the only one in my home. I need to take even better care of you." There were only 15 tables at our reception, but every dish had been carefully chosen. Mrs. Valor had made sure my favorite steamed sea bass was served first. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes. She had paid attention. I'd heard later that the leftovers from Ilara's 80-table extravaganza filled 3 industrial garbage bins. That night we arrived at our new home, an apartment assigned by the military. It was a simple 2-bedroom with sturdy, functional furniture. It was clean and bright, facing south with large windows. Cale came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "I'm sorry," he murmured into my hair. "This place is a bit small." I turned in his embrace to face him. "It's perfect. It faces south and gets great light." His eyes, a warm shade of hazel, lit up. Suddenly he reached up to the top of the wardrobe and pulled down a flat, wrapped box. I got you a surprise. Inside was a beautifully bound set of military history books. The very ones I had casually mentioned wanting to read months ago in a conversation I barely remembered. I looked up at him in shock. He scratched his head, a boyish gesture that was at odds with his soldier's bearing. I saved the note in my phone. Thought it'd make a good wedding gift. He remembered. He'd listened. The next morning I awoke to the smell of frying eggs and the gentle clatter of pans. The space beside me in bed was empty. I tiptoed into the kitchen to find Cale wearing an apron, carefully flipping eggs. A pot of milk warmed on the stove. "Did I wake you?" he asked, looking slightly flustered as he quickly turned off the heat. "I'm used to waking at 5:30. I wanted to let you sleep a little longer." The eggs were golden and perfectly crispy around the edges, exactly how I liked them. And then I remembered him watching me at the wedding banquet, quietly noting that I'd only taken the well-cooked eggs from the platter. He didn't miss a thing. After breakfast he insisted on doing the dishes. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a soft light on his profile. He caught me staring and smiled. "I'm taking you to meet my mom today. She's been talking about making her herbal chicken soup for you." His mother lived in an old but well-kept house on the military base. The rich, comforting scent of soup filled the air the moment we stepped inside. Mrs. Valor was a woman of few words but sharp eyes. She gently pulled me down to sit beside her, studying my face. "This boy didn't bully you, did he?" she asked, her tone serious. "Mom," Cale muttered, his ears turning red. "He's been wonderful," I said, and found I meant it. "He even made me breakfast this morning." Her stern expression softened. "This boy's been caring since he was little. When he was 8 he could cook noodles and take them to the hospital for his dad." She suddenly fell silent, her expression dimming. I would later learn that Cale's father had died from injuries sustained during a training mission. Cale's choice to join the military was a tribute to him. She prepared a feast for lunch and kept piling food on my plate. As we were leaving, she pressed a red cloth pouch into my hand. "This was from Cale's grandmother. It's yours now." Inside was a simple, smooth orange jade bracelet, warm and translucent from years of wear. "It's not worth much," she said, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. I slipped it on immediately. "It's beautiful. Thank you, Mom." On the drive home, Cale held my hand. At a red light he spoke softly. "After my dad passed, my mom raised me on her own. She always said, a wife isn't a housekeeper. She's a partner, someone to face life together with." His words settled deep in my soul, warming places that had been cold with fear and memory. Just then my phone buzzed. A photo from Alara. She stood on the spiral staircase of the Ronan family's villa, a wall of luxury handbags behind her. "Jealous, Lyra?" The text read, followed by a smug emoji. I locked the screen without replying. Cale had pulled over by a street vendor and was seriously inspecting roasted chestnuts as if performing a tactical assessment. He returned with a warm paper bag. "You said last time you liked these," he said, handing it to me. I peeled one open. It was sweet, fragrant, and perfectly warm. The simple, honest taste of it, given with such quiet attention, felt more valuable than any handbag wall in the world. I was beginning to understand the difference between being adorned and being cherished. And for the first time, I felt a tremor of fear for Alara, for the gilded cage she had so fiercely fought to re-enter. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. And I had a terrifying suspicion she would soon discover what that truly meant. The warmth of the chestnut faded, but the feeling it left behind, one of being seen, of being known, lingered. That evening, as I organized the few keepsakes from our simple wedding, I took off the jade bracelet to admire it. Holding it to the light, I noticed 4 delicate characters engraved on the inside. Peace and joy. A simple, profound wish from a grandmother to a granddaughter-in-law she'd never met. Outside on our small balcony, Cale was hanging laundry, his movements efficient and precise. The moonlight outlined his figure, a portrait of quiet strength and simple duty. I made a decision that night. Cale never missed his 5:30 a.m. wake-up. I would match his rhythm. When I pushed open the kitchen door the next morning, he was filling his thermos with hot water. He looked surprised, then pleased. "You're up early. I wanted to make breakfast for you," I said, tying on an apron and reaching for the eggs. His lips curled into a smile. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Let me teach you." This old stove is tricky. Heat control is important. He placed his hand over mine on the burner knob, his breath soft against my ear. His touch was warm, confident. In that moment, I couldn't help but remember my past life with Ronan, who had never once stepped into the kitchen, who always sat at the dining table reading the Financial Times, waiting for me to bring him his perfectly brewed coffee. My hands fumbled nervously. The yolk of the first egg broke, sizzling into a messy, lacy-edged sun. Cale ate every bite with relish. "You did better than me on my first try," he said cheerfully. I remembered my first attempt at frying eggs in my previous life. They'd been blackened discs of charcoal, and Ronan had pushed the plate away with a look of distaste. After breakfast, Cale insisted on washing the dishes himself. "Weren't you going to the military base commissary to shop today? I'll drop you off on the way," he offered. During the short drive, he gave me a detailed briefing worthy of a mission dossier. Which stall had the freshest vegetables, which auntie sold the best cuts of meat, who would give a fair price. These were things he'd carefully noted on his weekly trips home to his mother. After he dropped me off, I stood outside the bustling commissary taking a deep breath. It was a world away from the silent, air-conditioned luxury grocers I'd frequented before. "You must be Captain Valor's wife," a smiling vendor said, handing me a sturdy cloth bag. "Little Cale called yesterday. Told me you'd be coming. Asked me to save you a fresh base." She gestured to a beautifully cleaned fish already wrapped in paper. I stood there stunned. He had thought even this far ahead. The gesture, so simple and practical, meant more than a dozen roses. That afternoon, I followed a recipe on my phone with the intensity of a bomb disposal expert. I managed one dish and one soup. I'd been heavy-handed with the salt, but the sense of accomplishment was stronger than any I'd felt dining at a Michelin-starred restaurant in my past life. That night, after Cale fell asleep, I opened a simple notebook. In the quiet glow of my desk lamp, I began to write down everything I could remember from before. It wasn't about wealth or gossip. It was about history. 2015, large-scale military drill, Operation Steel Wave. 2016, new communications equipment piloted in the 3rd Corps. November 2015, the Ronan Group's first major capital chain crisis. I circled one entry. September 2015, regional military competition. Key focus: night combat and information-based warfare. The next morning over breakfast, I asked nonchalantly, "Is training going smoothly these days?" Cale set down his soy milk. "There's a confrontation drill next week. I've been studying topographical maps. The terrain near my hometown is hilly, complex." I handed him a napkin. "I used to hike those mountains as a kid. I know a few hidden trails." His eyes lit up with interest. Using my memory, I sketched out the terrain on a spare piece of paper, marking several little-known paths. "This creek bed," I pointed, "it dries up completely by September. You could use it as a hidden passage. But be careful on the eastern slope. There's a section of loose shale that can give away movement." Cale studied the map for a long time, then looked up at me, his expression a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "Lyra, how do you know all this?" "I was in the orienteering club in college," I lied smoothly. "And my dad's a military history buff. We have a lot of books on local topography." It was a thin excuse, but he seemed to accept it. 3 days later, he didn't get home until very late. His uniform was smudged with dirt, but his eyes were gleaming with excitement. "We used your route today for a flanking maneuver. Took out the red team's command post. The brigade commander praised us on the spot. I helped him out of his muddy gear. Must have just been good luck." "No," he said, gripping my hand. His palm was rough against mine. "It wasn't. That warning about the rocky slope? You were right. There were red team sentries stationed there. We circled around from the downstream route. It was flawless." The kettle started to whistle sharply on the stove. I turned to shut it off, hiding the smile that spread across my face. I had changed something. I had helped him. That weekend my phone rang. It was Alara. Her voice was thick, stuffy, as if she'd been crying. "Sis? Are you busy?" "Just finished grocery shopping." "What's up?" There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the echo of a large empty space behind her. "Ronan hasn't come home for 3 days." Her voice cracked. She started to cry, the sound raw and hopeless. "My mother-in-law says I'm useless. Can't even keep my husband around. I stood on the roadside under a sycamore tree, watching the dappled sunlight. In my past life around this time, Ronan had already started seeing other women. Maybe his company is busy with a new project. I offered, my voice flat. They keep saying something about funding rounds and equity agreements. I don't understand a word of it, she sobbed. Sis, how did you used to? She cut herself off abruptly. I tightened my grip on the phone. She had almost slipped. She wanted to ask how I had dealt with this in my past life. Pay more attention to his work, I said, the advice feeling hollow even as I gave it. At the very least, remember the names of his colleagues and what project he's currently working on. Who can remember all that? She snapped, her self-pity instantly morphing into irritation. Yesterday his secretary called. I mentioned a Mr. Wong by accident, but apparently it was someone named Lee. Ronan yelled at me for embarrassing him. Her tone was that of a martyr, not someone seeking a solution. When I got home, Cale was in the study, surrounded by maps and strategy books for the upcoming competition. I made him a cup of tea and set it by his hand. He looked up, smiled, and naturally pulled me down to sit beside him. Help me look at this tactical setup, he said, pointing to a complex diagram. That simple act of trust, of including me, of valuing my opinion, warmed me more than any grand gesture ever could. I looked at the diagrams, at his focused face, and then out the window at the setting sun. Our lives, chosen for us by a jealous sister's whim, were diverging at a staggering speed. I was building a partnership stone by careful stone. Elara, I feared, was already watching her gilded palace begin to crack. The trust Cale showed me became the foundation of our new life. I started spending more time in his study, initially just organizing his papers, then gradually offering small suggestions. What if the reconnaissance team used this ridgeline instead? It offers more cover. Or, the weather reports suggest heavy fog on the eastern sector that morning. Could that be an advantage? I was careful, always framing it as a question, a casual thought. But I saw the way his eyes would sharpen, the way he'd pause and reconsider a plan. My notebook of memories became my most guarded secret. I didn't just record military events. I noted personal details. Captain Lee, allergic to shellfish, loves spicy Sichuan cuisine. Colonel Chen's wife, Auntie Wang, her eldest, is applying to medical school. Vice Commander Xiao has a soft spot for traditional Peking opera. These were the fragments of 100 forgotten conversations from my previous life, now invaluable currency. When Cale mentioned a few of his teammates were coming for dinner, I didn't panic. I consulted my notes. Any dietary restrictions? Favorites? I asked him. He looked surprised as he scanned the list I'd prepared. How did you know Captain Lee can't eat seafood? You mentioned it once, I said, another small lie woven into the fabric of our new truth. The dinner was a success. The skills I'd honed entertaining Ronan's business associates, remembering names, refilling drinks at the right moment, facilitating conversation without dominating it, were now repurposed for a much more appreciative audience. Where did you find such a wife, Cale? Captain Lee boomed after a few beers, clapping Cale on the shoulder. She reads people better than the political office director. Cale's ears turned bright red, but his eyes shone with pride. I knew this dinner was more than a social gathering. Captain Lee was a key evaluator for the upcoming promotion assessments. Afterward, as we cleaned up together, Cale said softly, "Thank you for everything today. Captain Lee said your cooking is better than the officer's guest house." I laughed, drying a plate. I used to help my mom host guests all the time. The next week at the commissary, I accidentally ran into Auntie Wang. "Oh, Lyra. Old Lee hasn't stopped praising you since that dinner," she said warmly, taking my hand. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "The district has an inspection coming up next month. How's little Cale preparing?" I pretended to look worried. "He's been working overtime every day. I just don't know what the upper command is focusing on this time." Auntie Wang's voice dropped to a whisper. "Word is, this time they're focusing on night combat and information-based equipment operations." That evening, I casually mentioned to Cale, "I heard from someone at the commissary that Third Company's been training for nighttime shooting drills. Their scores are apparently really good." He paused, thoughtful, and gave a small nod. He began staying late to run night tactical exercises with his unit. A month later, after the inspection, Kale was recognized as the model officer for night combat operations. At the celebration banquet, his direct superior, Colonel Chin, patted him on the shoulder. "You were well prepared, right on point with the inspection's focus." Kale turned to look at me, his eyes filled with a deep, curious gratitude. I lowered my head and focused on my food. That night, as we got ready for bed, he finally asked, "Lyra, how did you know they'd focus on night operations this time?" "I guessed," I said, setting down my book. "Didn't the district just get new night vision equipment recently? They'd want to test its effectiveness." He stared at me for a few seconds, then chuckled, shaking his head. "Lyra, you're full of surprises." My phone buzzed. Another photo from Alara. She sat alone at a lavish table set for two. "Anniversary dinner," the message read. Ronan said he had a last-minute meeting. She'd added a crying emoji. In my past life, Ronan really did have a meeting that night, with his mistress at a hotel. I had waited for him until dawn, a cold, untouched gift sitting on the table. I locked the screen, the image fading to black. On the way home from the banquet, Kale was energized. "The competition next month is in Nanjing. Family members can come if you want to." "Of course," I answered without hesitation. That night, after Kale fell asleep, I opened my notebook again. One entry was marked in red ink. November 2015, Ronan Group's capital chain crisis. Ronan turns to Zhao Investments for help. I gently closed the book. Alara's hard days were only just beginning. The desk lamp cast a soft golden glow on Kale's profile. In front of him lay the 7th revision of his battle plan for the interregional competition. He'd been sleeping only 4 hours a night. I quietly set down a cup of honey grapefruit tea. He looked up, rubbing his tired, bloodshot eyes. "Did I wake you?" I pulled up a chair. "Where are you stuck?" He pointed to a section on the map. "Red team will definitely place forces here. A frontal assault would be too costly, but the alternate route would take too long." I studied the terrain, a place I knew only from his descriptions and my own secret knowledge. "This area," I pointed to the western edge, "is prone to landslides, right?" He paused, surprised. "How did you know?" "There was a landslide during a drill last year." "Just a hunch," I replied lightly. "If the red team expects you to take the long way around, they'll probably set up an ambush there. They'll think they're safe on the high ground." Kale shot to his feet, his chair screeching against the floor. He pulled me into a tight, sudden hug. "Lyra, you're a genius." He smelled faintly of pine and sweat, his heartbeat strong and fast against my cheek. The next morning, he headed straight to the command post to revise the plan. While cleaning the study, I found a note he'd left on the desk. "Might be home late tonight. Don't wait for dinner. P.S. Mrs. Chin invited you to her tea gathering." In the corner, he'd drawn a crooked little smiley face. The gesture was so genuine, so unlike the cold, templated messages Ronan used to send. The tea gathering at Colonel Chen's house was another exercise in careful diplomacy. I was polite, engaged but not overbearing. When the topic shifted to the upcoming military district anniversary celebration, Mrs. Chin turned to me. "Lyra, what kind of program is Kale's unit preparing?" "They're rehearsing now," I replied smoothly. "They're adapting their competition strategy into a tactical demonstration skit." In reality, Kale hadn't mentioned any such thing. But in my past life there had been a performance showcase, and the winners always gained favorable attention from the higher-ups. I texted Kale immediately after. He replied, "How did you know there'd be a performance showcase?" "The official notice just came out this morning." "Just a guess," I answered. "Don't they hold one every year?" He came home that evening with a thick stack of documents. "The political office is requiring every competing unit to prepare a program. We can adapt the military competition scenario." He looked at me with that complicated expression again. "Lyra, sometimes you're so accurate it's scary." A week later, their skit won the award for Best Creativity. After the performance, a white-haired general I recognized from my notes, Vice Commander Shao, shook Kale's hand. "You've got ideas, young man. Who designed this?" "It was the collective effort of our unit, sir," Kale replied humbly. "But my wife contributed quite a bit too." "Very good," the general said, patting his shoulder. "A husband and wife working together can accomplish anything." The evening banquet was held at the district guest house. I chose a navy blue dress, elegant without being showy. When Kale saw me, his eyes lit up. You look beautiful. I noticed several officers' wives subtly observing my manners. As Vice Commander Shao was chatting with Colonel Chen, his voice carried just enough. Your Captain Valor's wife has such poise. Just then a stir rippled through the hall. A familiar figure staggered inside. Alara. She wore a revealing evening gown, her cheeks unnaturally flushed. Behind her stood Ronan and a balding middle-aged man I recognized as a notoriously handsy investor. This is our company's latest proposal, Mr. Wong. Ronan's polished voice floated across the room. Alara's eyes were unfocused, the wine glass in her hand trembling. The moment she spotted me, her eyes widened in shock. Ronan noticed us and his face immediately darkened. He yanked Alara toward him roughly. Mr. Wong, let's talk over there. Alara stumbled and her wine glass shattered on the marble floor. The sharp sound drew everyone's stare. She tried to say something, but Ronan shot her a vicious glare that made her fall silent. Isn't that the heir to the Ronan group? Colonel Chen's wife whispered. Bringing his drunk wife to a business meeting. What is he thinking? I tightened my grip on my own glass. In my past life I had been that wife, forced to smile and drink until I was sick to secure his deals. Kale gently touched my hand. Do you want to check on her? I shook my head, my voice low. She chose this path. She has to walk it to the end. After the banquet, Vice Commander Shao asked Kale to stay behind. While I waited, Mrs. Shao came over. Word is, after the competition, there's a spot for advanced study at the National Defense University. Commander Shao really thinks highly of Kale. My heart skipped a beat. That program was a direct pipeline to the upper echelons. When Kale came out, his eyes were shining. Vice Commander Shao wants me to write a paper on information-based warfare. On the ride home, he couldn't stop talking about his ideas. Late that night, my phone buzzed. A voice message from Alara. The background was filled with the sound of vomiting. Sis, I can't take it anymore, she cried, her voice slurred and broken. He told me to keep that disgusting old man company. I stared at the ceiling for a long time before I replied. Do you need me to call you a car home? No, she sniffled. My mother-in-law said if I mess up another deal, she'll cut off my credit card. I set my phone aside. Outside, the moon was pale and cold over the watchtower. The paths of our second chances had diverged into two different worlds. Mine was being built on trust and shared purpose. Hers was already crumbling, built on the shifting sands of money and envy. And the truly terrifying part was that her collapse had only just begun. The acceptance letter from the National Defense University arrived on a morning I was hunched over the bathroom sink, dry heaving for the third time. A week of relentless morning sickness had already stolen 3 pounds from my frame, and my reflection was pale and wan. Lyra. Kale's voice was urgent outside the door, followed by a soft knock. Open up. I wiped my mouth, splashed water on my face and opened the door. He stood there, holding a large, formal craft envelope, his eyes shining with an excitement that momentarily overrode his concern. I got in. Vice Commander Shao called personally to confirm. I didn't even have time to form a congratulations before another wave of nausea surged up. I retched into the sink, my body convulsing. Kale's smile froze. He gently held my shoulders, steadying me. His gaze dropped to my stomach, then back to my face, a dawning realization in his eyes. Is it? Those 2 stark red lines on the test stick confirmed his guess an hour later. Kale immediately knelt on the bathroom tiles, pressing his face against my still flat stomach. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his voice muffled against my robe. A double blessing, he murmured. When he looked up, the corners of his eyes were glistening. I'm going to tell the political commissar today. I'm withdrawing from the program. Don't you dare talk nonsense, I said, tugging on his ear with a strength that surprised us both. This is a rare opportunity. But I don't want to leave you alone, he argued, his warm palm resting gently over my lower abdomen, a protective gesture that made my heart ache. Your mom can come stay with me. And if not, we can hire a part-time helper. Kale Valor, if you throw away this opportunity, I'll take this baby and move back to my parents' house. The threat was absurd, but it hung in the air. He stared at me for a few seconds, his expression serious, before his face suddenly broke into a wide, incredulous grin. He laughed, a rich, joyful sound that filled the small bathroom. Lyra, you're adorable when you threaten people. We struck a deal. He would attend the training program but return home every weekend. His mother would move in and stay with me until it was over. When Mrs. Valor arrived, she brought 3 live hens in a crate and a bundle of traditional herbs, instantly transforming our tidy kitchen into a bustling aromatic apothecary. The whole apartment smelled of angelica root and goji berries. After Kale's father passed, I relied on these remedies to get through, she said, skimming foam from a pot of broth with fierce concentration. Now you're eating for 2. You need the best nutrition. I sat on a low stool, peeling garlic, watching her. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, catching the silver strands at her temples. There was a steely love in her efficiency that I was deeply grateful for. After Kale left for Beijing, he texted me every day. Photos of his class notes, complaints about the cafeteria food. Every evening during our video calls, his first question was always, "How many times did you throw up today?" On weekends, he'd come home with stacks of military theory books and read aloud from them before bed. "For the baby," he'd say, his voice soft and earnest. One late night, I woke to find him already home, softly stroking my belly, whispering, "Daddy's going to protect you and Mommy no matter what." I pretended to be asleep, a single tear tracing a path into my hairline. Halfway through the program, Kale was selected to represent the school in a major joint military exercise. The night before his deployment, he was up late organizing materials. As I handed him a glass of warm milk, a thought, a fragment from a past conversation overheard, surfaced. What if you added an electronic warfare component to this plan? I ventured. A targeted disruption right before the main assault. He raised an eyebrow, looking at me over his glasses. "You understand electronic warfare?" "I've read a few articles," I said nonchalantly. In truth, one of Ronan's past mistresses had been an expert in electronic operations, and she'd never stopped bragging about it at tedious dinner parties. Kale, deep in thought, began modifying the plan. 2 weeks later, his unit, the Blue Team, won by a landslide. His electronic interference squad was rated as a key strategic asset. "The vice principal spoke to me today," he said excitedly over a grainy video call. "There's a chance I'll be assigned directly to the command department after graduation." I rubbed my now noticeably swollen belly and smiled. "That's wonderful, Kale." The next day at a prenatal checkup, the doctor grinned at the ultrasound monitor. "Twins. Both healthy and strong." I immediately texted Kale. His reply was a flood of exclamation marks, followed by a single line. "I've submitted a request to transfer back to my original post after graduation." "Are you crazy?" I called him right away. "The command department's too busy," he said, sounding almost aggrieved. "I want to be there when the babies are born. I want to watch them grow up. My dad died early. I know what it's like to grow up without a father." Just then a bugle call echoed from his end. "I love you," he said quickly, and hung up. I held the phone, my heart feeling soft and full like sugar melting in warm water. When I told Mrs. Valor, her eyes turned red. Just like his father. So stubborn. By the 6th month, my belly was enormous. Kale had finished his training and returned, now walking with me every evening without fail. The older women in the compound smiled indulgently. "Captain Valor is a model husband," they'd say. One weekend afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Alara standing there, her belly even larger than mine. Behind her huddled 3 little girls, their faces thin and timid. "Sis," she said, her face pale and waxy, a faint yellowing bruise under one eye. "Can I borrow some money?" I hurried them inside. The 3 girls sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, but their eyes were locked on a bowl of fruit. "What happened?" I asked gently, handing each girl an apple. Alara's tears burst forth like a broken dam. "The Ronan family is finished. His investments failed. Debt collectors show up every day." She clutched her stomach. "My mother-in-law said if I don't give birth to a boy this time," her voice choked off. I noticed faint, bracelet-like bruises circling her wrists. "Did Ronan do that?" I asked softly. Her whole body flinched. She instinctively shielded her stomach. He's just under a lot of pressure." By the time Kale came home, Alara had already left with the kids. I'd given her some cash, which she'd stuffed into her undershirt with a furtive, nervous energy. "I heard about the Ronan group," Kale said as he took off his jacket. "They took on too much private debt. The capital chain has collapsed." It's a huge mess. He crouched down and pressed his ear to my belly, his voice softening. No matter what happens out there, as long as we're together, that's enough. I stroked his short, bristly hair. Yeah, I whispered. Being together is enough. Cale's promotion order arrived in my 7th month. He was made regimental chief of staff, granted the rank of major. The day it was announced, the whole regiment applauded. Colonel Chin laughed. Once those twins are born, we'll throw a proper celebration. The day before Alara's due date, she called again, crying so hard her words were barely coherent. It's another girl. Ronan didn't even look at her. He just left. My mother-in-law is demanding a divorce. As I listened to the newborn's thin cries on the other end of the line, my chest tightened with a sorrow that was both old and new. Then one early morning my own labor pains hit, sudden and intense. Cale reacted like it was a mission launch. He had the hospital bag in hand in seconds. Mrs. Valor insisted on bringing a jar of specially brewed soup. Giving birth is a battle. You'll need your strength. Outside the delivery room I heard Cale arguing with the doctor, his voice low but fierce. Prioritize the mother. If anything happens, save my wife first. 12 grueling hours later, our healthy boy and girl were born. Cale's eyes were red-rimmed as he cut the umbilical cords. Then he kissed me hard on the forehead. Lyra, you're my hero. The nurse brought over the cleaned-up babies. The girl had Cale's eyes. The boy had my nose. Cale cradled his daughter, brushing her tiny cheek with his finger. Daddy's here, he whispered. During my hospital stay, Cale learned to change diapers and make formula with a soldier's precision. One night I woke to find him bent over the crib, whispering, Daddy will always protect you and Mommy. We named them En and Lu, drawing from the characters on the bracelet. Peace and joy. On the day we were discharged, a big red banner hung in front of our building. Congratulations to Chief of Staff Valor on the birth of twins. The hallway was stacked with baby gifts from neighbors. Hand-knitted booties, tiny blankets. Mrs. Valor gave us the master bedroom. You two need the space for rest and work. At my age, sleeping less is no big deal. Late at night during feedings, I'd often see Cale tiptoe into the nursery, returning minutes later with a proud grin. Mom slept through it. I changed the diaper myself. The twins' 1-month celebration was set for Army Day. The invitations had barely gone out when my phone rang. It was Alara. Her voice was faint, distant. Sis, can I come? Just me. The kids are too loud. Of course, I said, pausing. Are you okay? There was a long silence on the other end. The Ronan family is bankrupt. Nathan's gone. The line went dead. I hung up and looked at An and Lu, sleeping peacefully in their cribs. We had started from the same point, the same day, the same second chance. But our paths could not have been more different. Fate, I was learning, was never about the choice you were given. It was about what you built with it afterwards. And while I was building a home, Alara was watching hers burn to the ground. The military dining hall buzzed with a warmth that had nothing to do with the steam rising from the buffet tables. We'd laid out 20 tables, and Cale had somehow convinced the head cook to prepare all my favorite dishes. I wore a loose-fitting red dress, little and cradled in my arms. Cale stood beside me at the entrance, a picture of proud exhaustion, holding Lu as we welcomed a steady stream of well-wishers. What a lucky guy you are, Chief Valor, his fellow officers boomed, clapping him on the back and stuffing red envelopes into our hands. Cale's grin was permanent, stretching from ear to ear. No, look, our daughter looks like her mom. It's our son who looks like me, he kept insisting as if it were the most important tactical distinction of the day. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, glinting off the red tablecloths and the happy, flushed faces of our friends. I rocked in gently. Her little cheeks were rosy and she'd break into a sudden, toothless grin every so often. Each time she did, Cale would beam as if she'd just delivered a keynote address. See? My little princess is smiling at me. Colonel Chin and his wife came over, each cooing over a baby and presenting them with red envelopes. Cale, looks like you've got it all, the colonel said, his eyes crinkling. Career and family both flourishing. Cale had just opened his mouth to respond when a subtle shift in the room's energy made me turn. A hush had fallen over the entrance. Bella stood there, a stark anomaly in the cheerful scene. She wore a wrinkled, faded dress, clutching a cheap plastic bag. She was painfully thin, her cheekbones sharp blades under her skin, making her eyes look unnaturally large and full of a desperate, hungry envy. She walked over slowly, her movements jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. "This is for the babies," she said, her voice rough like stones grinding together. She thrust the bag at me. Inside were 2 pairs of cheap white baby socks, the tags still attached, the fabric thin and scratchy. I accepted them without a flicker of reaction. "Thank you, Bella. We'll definitely use these." Her eyes landed on the twins and her lips trembled. "They're beautiful. A boy and a girl. You're so lucky." The words were meant to be pleasant, but they came out coated in a bitter acid. Kale, ever the gracious host, stepped in smoothly. "Come on in, Bella. Have a seat. We're about to start." She scurried into the hall like a frightened animal, finding an empty chair in the very back. I noticed the soles of her shoes were completely worn through, the heels battered into oblivion. Once the banquet began, Kale stood on the small stage, held securely in one arm. In his neatly pressed uniform, his new rank gleaming, he looked every inch the leader, the family man, the success story. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the first month of our daughter and son," he said, his voice cracking with emotion he didn't try to hide. I don't know what I've done to deserve a wife like mine or children this healthy and perfect." The hall erupted in warm, genuine applause. From the corner of my eye, I saw Bella sitting alone. She wasn't clapping. She was staring fixedly at Kale, her fingers clenched together on the tablecloth so tightly her knuckles were bone white. During the toast, she sidled up next to me. I was feeding in and looked up as she whispered, her breath smelling faintly of cheap wine. "Sis." Her voice was tight. "Ronan ran away." "What?" I asked, genuinely stunned. "His company went bankrupt," she said, the words laced with a furious, shaking rage. "He's buried in debt. Last week, in the middle of the night, he packed a bag and left. Didn't even leave a note." Her eyes glistened, but the dominant emotion was a pure, undiluted anger. I saw a fresh, bluish bruise circling her neck, the distinct imprint of a man's grip. "Where are you living now?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "My mother-in-law," Bella sneered, the sound ugly. "That which mortgaged the house. I'm staying with the kids in one of Ronan's old properties in the suburbs. No heating. Nothing." I remembered my past life, how I'd secretly brokered the deal with Zhao Investments that had saved the Ronan family. Ronan had held me then, called me his lucky charm. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else. After the last guest had left, Bella lingered, a ghost at the feast. As we gathered our things, she suddenly dropped to her knees on the sticky floor and clutched at my leg, her nails digging into my skin through my dress. "Sis, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Lend me 100,000 yuan. The kids need to eat. They need to go to school." Startled, I nearly dropped, and Kale was there in an instant, smoothly taking the baby from my arms. "Let's go talk over there," I told her quietly, leading her to a quieter corner. "I don't have that much in cash," I said, helping her up. Her body was trembling violently. "And even if I did, the Ronan family's debts aren't something a small amount can fix." 50,000 then," she cried, clutching my hands, her desperation a physical force. "I know Kale just got promoted. You guys have money." In the end, I gave her 20,000 yuan from the red envelope money and told her she didn't need to pay it back. As she grabbed the bills, the way her eyes lit up, a frantic, greedy gleam, was a perfect echo of the moment in our past life when she'd plunged the knife into me. "You're so damn lucky," she spat, stuffing the money into her bra. Her voice was bitter, venomous. "No matter who you marry, your life turns out perfect." Kale drove her to the train station. When he came back, his face was somber. "She cried the whole way there," he said quietly. "She said she regrets fighting you over Ronan." I didn't respond as I rocked a fussy Lou. Regret. The only thing she regretted was betting on the wrong horse. Her apology wasn't for stabbing me, it was for losing the game. That night, I quietly opened education fund accounts for each of Bella's 5 daughters. I set up automatic monthly deposits. The children at least would have a chance. 3 months later, I was buying formula at a mall when I felt the prickle of being watched. I turned to see Bella ducking behind a shelf. "Come out, Bella," I said, my voice flat. She shuffled out slowly, holding her youngest daughter, who was thin and whimpering. "Why are you following me?" I asked. I didn't wait for an answer. I took several cans of formula and a pack of diapers and put them in her cart. Her eyes turned red. I went to the bank. I know it's you sending money for the kids. Her voice trembled. Why? After everything I did to you. The kids are innocent, I said simply. Suddenly she grabbed my wrist. Sis, Ronan's a monster. He took everything. My jewelry, even my wedding ring. I looked down at her rough, chapped hands and was reminded of my past life, of Ronan taking my own jewelry piece by piece for his mistresses. You need to find a job, I said with a sigh. A friend of mine runs a daycare. I can refer you as a caregiver. Bella yanked her hand back as if I'd branded her. Me? Serve other people's kids? I'm from the Ronan family. The Ronan family doesn't exist anymore, I said calmly. You need to eat. Your kids need to go to school. Her face twisted through several expressions: outrage, shame, defiance. Finally she forced out, I'll think about it. Then she hurried off, pushing the cart with its precious cargo without a thank you, without a backward glance. When I got home, Cale was on the floor reading a fairy tale to the twins. Lou was drooling on his chest and was staring intently at the pictures. You're back, he said, looking up with a smile. And rolled over for the first time today. I set the formula down and kissed both of my babies, my heart swelling until it ached. Cale smelled of gentle soap and baby lotion, a scent of pure, uncomplicated love. Lyra, he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. I'm going on a work trip to Beijing next week. Might be gone for 2 weeks. I folded a tiny onesie. Your mom is here to help. We'll be fine. It's for a Central Military Commission meeting, he said in a lower voice. There's a chance I'll be reassigned to a headquarters position. I looked at him, stunned. In my past life, that transfer had been the launchpad for a meteoric rise. That's incredible news, Cale. He scratched his head. But it means living in Beijing full-time. I was thinking of turning it down. Don't be ridiculous, I said, my voice sharper than I intended, startling Lou. I softened my tone, patting his back. Do you know how many people would kill for an opportunity like that? But the kids are still so young. We'll move with you, I interrupted. Cale, don't give up your career for the family. You'll just end up resenting us for it later. He stared at me for a long moment, this woman who seemed to see the future, who was never afraid of change. Then he suddenly smiled. Lyra, sometimes I think you're more mature than I am. He placed the twins in their playpen and wrapped his arms around me. Then let's go to Beijing together. I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in that warm, familiar scent. We were a team, a unit, and we were moving forward together. The past, with all its pain and jealousy, felt like a distant country. We had built a new world and we were taking it with us. The move to Beijing was a whirlwind of organized chaos. Our new home was a 2-story detached house within a secure military compound, a world away from our modest apartment. On moving day, Cale's mother, Mrs. Valor, bustled about, directing soldiers carrying boxes with the authority of a 5-star general. Don't scratch the door frame. These old bones can still manage, she'd say, though her eyes welled up as she watched Cale on a ladder, hanging curtains in the living room. If only his father could have seen this day. Just as we were unpacking the kitchen, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. When I picked up, it was Bella's oldest daughter, Tina, her voice small and terrified. Auntie Lyra? Mommy's burning up and talking nonsense. I glanced at my busy family, Cale wrestling with a bookshelf, Mrs. Valor arranging pots, and lowered my voice. Did you take her to the hospital? No, she whispered, her voice trembling. We don't have the money for the deposit. The little ones are crying from hunger. Half an hour later, I stood in front of a crumbling house on the outskirts of the city. The paint was peeling and plastic sheets were nailed over broken windows. The smell of mildew and despair hit me the moment I opened the door. Bella was lying on a stained, thin mattress, her cheeks flushed with fever. The 5 girls huddled around her like frightened sparrows. Tina held the youngest, whose cries were weak and thin. There was no heat. The girls were dressed in threadbare clothes, their small fingers purple with cold. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice tight as I felt her scorching forehead. When she saw it was me, she didn't protest. She just burst into ragged, hopeless tears. Tis, I was wrong. I never should have fought you. I'm sorry. Don't say that now. I took off my coat and wrapped the smallest shivering girl in it. Tina, get your mom's insurance card. We're going to the hospital. Bella struggled to sit up. I don't have insurance. It's been lapsed for half a year. I called an ambulance immediately, then called Kale's driver to come pick up the kids. Bella was hospitalized for 3 days with severe pneumonia. I hired a nurse and temporarily moved the 5 girls into our spacious guest rooms. They were quiet, wide-eyed, and heartbreakingly polite. Let them stay, Kale said when he came home from a meeting, his arms laden with bags of new clothes and backpacks for them. We have the space. I shook my head. Bella won't allow it. Her pride is all she has left. I was right. When Bella was discharged and saw her kids clean, well-fed, and sitting around our dining table, her face didn't soften with gratitude. It darkened with humiliation. Sis, she said, her voice sharp. What's this supposed to mean? Mommy, Auntie gave us new backpacks, the youngest girl said innocently. Bella yanked her daughter to her side. Shut up. She turned her fury on me. Don't think a little charity gives you the right to look down on us. Kale frowned and stepped forward, but I placed a hand on his arm. The kids need to go to school, I said, my voice steady. Tina's grades are good. She could test into a top middle school. Don't you dare meddle, she shrieked, her voice hysterical. Haven't you taken enough from me already? You stole my whole life. She grabbed the girls and stormed out, not even taking the coats we'd bought them. The youngest looked back at me, her eyes filled with a confusion that broke my heart. Let her cool off, Kale sighed, putting an arm around me. She'll come back when she thinks it through. But when Bella returned, it was worse. It was a day of heavy snow. A soldier called from the gate. There was a woman with children asking for me. Bella stood outside the sentry post, her down coat filthy and torn. The 5 girls clustered behind her, shivering violently. As soon as she saw me, she fell to her knees in the snow. Sis, please, she sobbed, the fight finally gone from her, replaced by raw survival. Take us in. The landlord kicked us out. Ethan was at a meeting. I had the soldier help bring them inside. Hot baths, warm food, clean clothes. The girls, exhausted, fell asleep quickly in the guest rooms. Bella sat on the living room couch, her eyes swollen and empty. Ronan's gone for good, she whispered, clutching a mug of tea, her hands trembling. He racked up over $3 million in loan shark debt. They said they'd take the kids as collateral. She was silent for a moment. I'll find a job. Anything. I looked at her, this broken mirror of myself. You can stay, I said finally. But under 2 conditions. First, the children must go to school like normal. Second, you need to find a job. Even if it's something basic. Her face shifted, a flicker of the old calculation returning. I could go work at that preschool your friend runs. You wouldn't be helping my friend, I said, looking her straight in the eyes. You'd be helping yourself. Belle, you're 30. It's time to grow up. She lowered her head. The steam from her tea blurred her expression. The first few days were tense but peaceful. Bella took the kids to a nearby school and even tried to help with chores. But the peace shattered on a Friday night. I returned early from a military wives' meeting. Pushing open my bedroom door, I found Bella standing at my vanity, holding the orange jade bracelet Kale's grandmother had given me. I was just looking, she stammered, hastily hiding it behind her back. I stepped in and closed the door. Put it down. Her face went from red to white. Then a terrifying anger contorted her features. She wrenched her hand free. Why do you get everything good? She burst out, her voice a shrill knife. That bracelet should have been mine. Kale should have been mine. The good life should have been mine. You were the one who gave up on Kale, I said, my voice cold and calm. She screamed as if I'd scalded her. Don't act so smug. You just got lucky and married well. She lunged at me, grabbing my bag. Where's the money? I know you have cash. We struggled. The bracelet fell to the carpet with a soft thud. Kale's mother rushed in at the noise, and Bella finally let go, panting heavily, glaring at me with pure, undiluted hatred. I'm fine, I said, smoothing down my disheveled hair. My heart was hammering. Bella is moving out tomorrow. That night I spoke to Kale on the phone. He was quiet for a long time after I explained. Do you want me to send someone to handle it? No, I replied, watching our twins sleeping peacefully in their cribs. Just rent her a place. Send the support for the kids regularly, but don't let her into the compound again. The next day, Bella and her daughters were relocated to a small, clean two-bedroom apartment in the southern suburbs. It was simple but decent. I transferred 30,000 yuan into her account for initial expenses. A social worker would check weekly to ensure the children were cared for. As I saw them off, I said, "If school is ever disrupted, I will apply for guardianship." Bella glared at me with a hatred so familiar it was almost comforting. But as the car door closed, I saw it. Her eyes welled with tears she quickly brushed away. 3 months later, the social worker reported Bella had taken a job as a cashier at a supermarket. The children were attending school regularly. 6 months after that, I heard she'd started taking night classes in accounting. The chasm between us was now a permanent, uncrossable geography. She was in the world of survival, of small wages and night classes. I was in a world of military banquets and whispered promotions. But for the first time she was standing on her own 2 feet. However unsteadily, she was building her own floor, not waiting for someone else to give her a room in their palace. And for her daughter's sake, that was the only thing that mattered. The years softened the sharp edges of memory. The terror of the knife, the desperation of those early days in the second life, all receded into a warm, steady hum of contentment. Our home in Beijing was filled with the sounds of growing children, and serious questions about stars, Li's infectious giggle, Kale's low laughter, and the gentle clatter of his mother's cooking. Kale's career was a quiet, steady ascent. He was respected not for political maneuvering but for competence and integrity. The appointment to deputy director of a division under the Central Military Commission had been just the beginning. He'd bypassed standard procedure, a testament to the unique regard his superiors held for him. The announcement ceremony was held at the Defense Ministry itself. Vice Commander Xiao, now retired but still influential, attended in person, clapping Kale on the shoulder. 35 and already at deputy division level. There are few in the whole army who can match you valor. The celebration was at the military district's guest house. I wore a tailored navy blue suit dress, my hair neatly tied back. Kale stood beside me in his full dress uniform, the stars on his epaulets gleaming under the lights. People came over one after another to toast him. I was no longer Miss Lyra, or Ronan's wife. I was Mrs. Valor. Comrade Lyra's contributions are no small thing, a retired general chuckled, his eyes twinkling. I heard Deputy Director Valor's proposal on integrated battlefield networks. Wasn't that your work? I gave a modest smile. I just helped proofread it for typos. In truth, the kernel of that idea had come from a drunken rant by one of Ronan's business associates, a man bragging about his mistress's military connections. A worthless piece of gossip in one life had become a cornerstone of my husband's career in another. The banquet didn't end until late. Kale, who held his liquor well, was nevertheless glowing with a happiness that went beyond the alcohol. In the car home he held my hand tightly. "Lyra," he murmured, looking out at the river of lights that was Beijing at night. "Without you I wouldn't be where I am today." Our new life was full and bright. But the past has a way of echoing. On a clear spring day years later, during the Qingming festival, I drove alone to a cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The trunk held 2 bouquets of white chrysanthemums. One for my father, one for my mother. The twins were with Kale, visiting a military museum. The spring breeze stirred the fresh green willow branches as I walked the familiar path to my parents' tombstone. I stopped short. A figure was already there, kneeling, her shoulders trembling slightly. Belle. She was heavier than the last time I'd seen her, dressed in a plain, neat gray coat, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She heard my footsteps and turned, her face streaked with tears. She looked older. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes, but the bitterness that once lived in her gaze was gone, replaced by a weary peace. I didn't know you'd come today," she stammered, hurriedly wiping her face with her sleeve. "I come every year at this time," I said, placing my flowers beside the offerings she'd brought. A few apples and a pack of cigarettes. My father had loved to smoke. We stood in silence for a moment, the only sound the wind through the headstones. "How are the kids?" finally asked. "Tina got into teacher's college," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "The others are doing okay too. Thanks to the education fund." She didn't look at me when she said it. "I went back and got my certification. I'm an accountant now. For a small firm." I nodded. "That's good, Bella." She reached into her bag and pulled out a plastic bag. I knitted these for the kids. I'm not very good at it, but it's real wool. Inside were 2 small sweaters, one pink, one blue. The stitching was uneven, clumsy in places. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. I didn't know you could knit. I learned in night school, she muttered, rubbing her rough, work-worn fingertips. I do some hand sewing for a clothing factory on the side, just for extras. The sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating our parents' names on the headstone. Lyra, she said suddenly, her voice firm. I'm sorry. The breeze rustled the chrysanthemum petals. She was apologizing for the right thing. Not for losing, but for the knife. For the hatred. It's in the past now, I said, looking at our parents' photos. And for the first time I truly felt it. They caught Ronan last year, she said with a strange, quiet finality. He was working as muscle for a casino in Macau. Fraud charges too. She hugged herself. You were right. Just picking the right person isn't enough. You have to be strong yourself. I turned to her and saw not the twisted face of my killer, nor the desperate woman in the snow, but a survivor. The years had smoothed away the chaos and left something real behind. The kids can come visit sometime, I said. Anne and Lu haven't met their cousins yet. Her eyes lit up, then dimmed with practiced restraint. It's better if we don't come to the compound. It's not appropriate. She had learned her place, but she had also found her dignity within it. I handed her a business card with my address and private number. I have a small apartment in the city. It's empty. You and the girls can use it whenever you want. The keys at the management office. She took it, her fingers trembling. Thank you. Really. Thank you. We left the cemetery one after the other. Parked beside my car was an old electric scooter. In the front basket was a supermarket employee cap. It was a life of hardship, but it was hers. I'm off, she said, climbing onto the scooter with a clumsy grace. If they don't like the sweaters, don't feel bad about not using them. Bella, I called out as she started to leave. Next Wednesday is Lee's birthday. She froze for a second, then nodded, a genuine, uncalculated smile touching her lips. I'll remember. On the drive back my phone rang. It was Kale. In the background I could hear the kids chattering excitedly. Mom. Lee's voice came through, clear and bright. Dad said we get to see a real tank. It's a tour of the tank exhibit, sweetie, I laughed. Kale's warm chuckle followed. We're just visiting the exhibit. So what do you want for dinner? I'll cook, I said, feeling a wave of profound contentment. How about hot pot? It's still a bit chilly out. After hanging up, I glanced at the plastic bag on the passenger seat. I pulled out the blue sweater and noticed a small tag sewn inside the collar. The embroidery was uneven and crooked, but the characters were unmistakable. Ping on Sheila. Peace and joy. The same words etched inside the jade bracelet. When I got home, Kale was in the kitchen expertly slicing lamb for the hot pot. The twins were at the table kneading dough into lumpy, abstract shapes. Mom, look. Lou ran over, proudly holding a doughy mass. I made a tank. Wash your hands first, chef, I said, laughing as I dodged her floury fingers. Kale wore an apron, his focus on chopping scallions. At 35 he looked more handsome than the day I'd met him, his presence grounded and sure. The golden star on his epaulette gleamed under the kitchen light. You're back, he said with a soft smile. Was it crowded? Not too bad. I set my bag down. I ran into Bella. He paused for just a second, his knife hovering. How is she? She's an accountant now, I said, taking out the 2 little sweaters. She knitted these for the kids. He picked one up, examining the clumsy, heartfelt stitches. His expression softened. The stitches are pretty solid, he said, a world of forgiveness in his simple words. That night, after the kids were asleep, we sat on the balcony with cups of tea. The April sky was clear, a few stars flickering above us. She said Ronan was arrested, I said. Kale nodded. I heard. It wasn't just debt. There were fraud charges. He sipped his tea. She also said life isn't just about picking the right person. I smiled. That sounds like something I'd say. I did say it. I leaned against his shoulder. What if I'd chosen Ronan back then? He thought for a moment, his arm slipping around me. You'd have had a better life than Bella, but not better than now. Why? Because you're you, he said as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. You're capable. And you'd have found a way to build a good life regardless. He playfully pinched my nose. And someone like Ronan never deserved you in the first place. I smiled, nestling closer. Oli's birthday. Let's invite her cousins. Good idea, he agreed immediately. And we can give Bella the key to the city apartment. It's just sitting there. It's closer to the kids' schools. I looked at him surprised. I'd been thinking the same thing but hadn't mentioned it. What? He raised an eyebrow, a mischievous glint in his eye. You think I didn't notice you've been quietly supporting her kids all these years? I'm a strategist, Lyra. I notice things. The moonlight bathed us in a quiet, gentle glow. I thought of the knife, of the jealousy, of the two girls who had been given a second chance. We had started from the same point, but our choices had carved our paths. Bella had clawed her way to a hard-won peace. I had built a life of profound joy. Life wasn't a multiple-choice question with one right answer. It was the sum of every choice, every act of resilience, every moment of grace we managed to find. Cale's hand found mine, his thumb stroking my palm, over the calluses that matched his own. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the moon, listening to the quiet breath of our sleeping children inside. We had our result. And it was indeed beautiful. The end.